Don't forget to like the video, share thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to stay updated with our latest stories. The little cul-de-sac where I'd lived for the past 15 years was usually a quiet place. Maple Drive, they called it, though most of the maples had been replaced by sensible, low-maintenance evergreens long before I moved in. My name is Carol, by the way, and if you told me a few months ago that the most exciting thing to happen on our street would involve me and old Mr. Abernathy from next door, I'd have probably offered you a cup of tea and a gentle reality check. Mr. Abernathy, or Arthur as he'd insisted I call him after I helped him with his runaway wheelie bin one blustery autumn afternoon, was a fixture, as much a part of the neighborhood's character as the slightly crooked lamppost at the end of the drive. He was 80-something, I reckoned, with kind eyes that crinkled at the corners and a shock of white hair that always looked like he'd just been caught in a friendly gust of wind. He mostly kept to himself, tending his small rose garden with a devotion that was both admirable and, to my non-gardening self, a little mystifying. Our interactions were usually limited to polite nods over the fence, comments about the weather, the kind of easy, unhurried exchanges that stitched together the fabric of suburban life. I work from home, editing manuscripts, so my days are mostly spent in the company of words and fictional characters. My own life felt pretty settled, maybe a little too settled, if I was being honest with myself. My son, Michael, was grown and living a state away, and my husband, Tom, had passed nearly 5 years prior. It was a quiet life, not a bad one, but one where unexpected events were usually things like a new bird species at the feeder. Not what happened at IT was a Tuesday morning, I remember, because the recycling trucks had just rumbled through. The air had that crisp, early summer feel, the kind that promises warmth but still carries a hint of morning coolness. I was on my porch, coffee in hand, trying to summon the energy to tackle a particularly dense historical novel, when I saw Arthur shuffling down his driveway. He was carrying something in his hands, a wooden box that looked like about the size of a shoebox, maybe a bit deeper. He moved slowly, deliberately, his gaze fixed on the object. He paused at the edge of my lawn, looking over at me with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. It wasn't distress, not exactly, but there was a certain gravity to his demeanor that was unusual. "Morning, Carol," he said, his voice a little reedy, like dry leaves rustling. "Morning, Arthur," I replied, offering a smile. "Lovely day, isn't it?" He nodded, his eyes still on the box. "Indeed, indeed. Carol, I have something for you." This was unexpected. Arthur wasn't one for giving gifts, not that I knew of. We exchanged Christmas cards, of course, and he'd once given me a perfect rose from his garden, a deep crimson one, after I'd admired it. But this felt different. He walked over to my porch steps, holding the box out with both hands. It was old, made of a dark, polished wood, bound with what looked like tarnished brass fittings. There was no keyhole that I could see, which struck me as odd. "Arthur, what's this?" I asked, a little taken aback. "A small thing," he said. His gaze flickered up to meet mine, then back to the box. "Something I'd like you to have. I'm clearing a few things out, you see. Downsizing, in a manner of speaking." His smile was faint, tinged with something I couldn't name. Melancholy, perhaps. "Oh," I said, a little awkwardly. "Well, that's very kind of you, Arthur, but are you sure? It looks rather special." "It is, in its own way," he murmured. "But its time with me is done. I thought you might appreciate it." He pressed it gently into my hands. The wood was smooth, cool to the touch, and heavier than I expected. "I don't know what to say, Arthur. Thank you." I looked at the box, then back at him. "Are you all right?" He gave a slow nod. As right as rain, Carol. Just making arrangements. Enjoy your day. And with that, he turned and shuffled back to his own house, leaving me standing there with the mysterious container. I carried it inside, placing it on my kitchen table. The sunlight streaming through the window caught the grain of the wood, highlighting its age and the care with which it must have once been made. It was beautiful, undeniably, but also deeply perplexing. Why me? And what on earth was inside? There was no obvious way to open it. No clasp, no button, no keyhole. I ran my fingers along the edges, searching for a hidden latch or a seam that might suggest a lid, but it felt solid, seamless, a strange gift, indeed. My curiosity, usually reserved for the twists and turns of the manuscripts I edited, was thoroughly piqued. Little did I know that this simple wooden box, given to me on an ordinary Tuesday morning, was about to uncover a secret that would change how I saw my quiet neighbor and, in some ways, how I saw myself. It was the beginning of something, though I couldn't have told you what. All I knew was that Mr. Abernathy had entrusted me with something he considered special, and an odd sense of responsibility, mixed with an undeniable thrill of intrigue, settled over me. The historical novel on my desk was completely forgotten. My day, it seemed, had just taken a very different turn. I spent the rest of that morning and a good part of the afternoon examining the box from every conceivable angle. It was made of a dark, rich wood, possibly walnut or mahogany, with a subtle, almost spicy scent that spoke of age and disuse. The brass fittings that bound the corners were intricately etched with a delicate floral pattern, so worn down in places that the design was barely visible. It was clearly an item of quality, something made to last, to hold things of importance. But its complete lack of any visible opening mechanism was maddening. I pressed, I prodded, I gently shook it. I heard nothing rattle inside, which only deepened the mystery. If it was empty, why give it with such solemnity? If it wasn't, what did it contain that was so silent, so still? I even resorted to searching online for antique wooden box, no keyhole, and similar phrases, scrolling through images of puzzle boxes and trick containers. Some were incredibly elaborate, requiring a sequence of hidden slides or rotations. I tried applying gentle pressure to different parts of the surface, hoping to feel a slight give, a hidden spring, but it remained stubbornly inert. It was frustrating, yet the more the box resisted, the more determined I became. It was a quiet challenge, a silent conversation between me and this enigmatic object. Later that afternoon, I saw Arthur in his garden, carefully deadheading his roses. I considered going over, asking him how to open it, but something stopped me. His demeanor when he'd given it to me, it felt like he was passing on not just an object, but a task, a puzzle to be solved. Asking for the solution felt like cheating, like I'd be missing the point. Perhaps the discovery was meant to be part of the gift itself. My mind started to race with possibilities. What could be inside that Arthur, a man of such quiet routine, would want to pass on in this way? Old letters, perhaps? Photographs? A diary? The more I thought about it, the more the box seemed to represent a life's untold stories, a tangible piece of someone's past. And Arthur had chosen me to be its custodian. It was a strange feeling, this sudden intimacy with a man I barely knew beyond pleasantries. Dinner was a distracted affair. I made myself a salad, but found myself mostly pushing lettuce around my plate, my thoughts returning again and again to the box sitting on my coffee table, where I'd moved it. It dominated the room, not physically, but with its silent presence, its unanswered questions. As evening drew in, I sat in my armchair, the box on my lap. The house was quiet, the only sounds the gentle hum of the refrigerator and the distant bark of a dog. I traced the worn carvings on the brass with my fingertip. There was a small, almost imperceptible scratch near one of the corner fittings, newer than the other marks of age. Had Arthur tried to open it recently? Or was it a clue? I pressed around the scratch, pushed the fitting, tried to slide it. Nothing. I sighed, a little defeated. Maybe I was overthinking it. Maybe it was just a beautiful old box he thought I, as someone who appreciated history through my work, would like. But his words, "It is, in its own way, special," echoed in my mind. There was more to it. I felt it, just as I was about to give up for the night and resign myself to having a beautiful but impenetrable ornament. My fingers, idly tracing the bottom edge of the box, brushed against something. A slight unevenness, a tiny, almost invisible line in the wood that didn't quite match the grain. My heart gave a little flutter. I ran my nail along it. It wasn't a crack. It felt more like a seam, so perfectly joined that it was almost imperceptible. Holding my breath, I pressed gently on one side of the line. Nothing. I pressed on the other. For a moment, still nothing. Then I felt it, a minuscule click, a shift so subtle I almost missed it. Adrenaline surged through me. I pressed again, more firmly this time, and a section of the base, no more than a couple of inches square, slid inward with a soft whisper of wood on wood. It wasn't the main opening, I realized, but a compartment, a hidden drawer so cleverly concealed it was a marvel of craftsmanship. My fingers fumbled slightly as I eased it open. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded velvet, lay a single, small, intricately shaped brass key. It was old, delicate, and clearly not a key for a standard lock. Its design was almost floral, echoing the etchings on the box's fittings. I stared at it, a wave of triumph washing over me, quickly followed by a fresh wave of anticipation. This was it. This had to be the way in. But where was the keyhole it belonged to? I picked up the box again, turning it over and over, my eyes scanning every surface with renewed intensity. And then I saw it, something I dismissed before. On one of the brass corner fittings, right in the center of the worn floral design, was a tiny circular indentation, no bigger than the head of a pin. It wasn't a scratch. It looked like it had been designed to be almost invisible, part of the pattern itself. With trembling hands, I took the small key and gently inserted its tip into the minuscule hole. It fit. It actually fit. I turned it a quarter turn to the right and heard another, more decisive click, this time from within the box. At the same time, I felt a faint seam appear along the top edge. Where the lid met the body, I paused, my heart pounding. This was the moment. The moment the secret, whatever it was, would be revealed. I thought of Arthur, his quiet eyes, his gentle demeanor. What memories, what piece of his life had he so carefully, so secretly locked away? And why give it to me now? The weight of that unspoken trust felt immense. Taking a deep breath, I slowly, carefully lifted the lid. The scent that wafted out was faint, a whisper of dried flowers, old paper, and something else, something uniquely personal and indefinable, like the lingering essence of a memory. My eyes adjusted to the dim interior, and I saw that the box was lined with the same faded velvet as the secret compartment. Lying within were not piles of letters or photographs, as I might have half expected. Instead, there were just a few, carefully chosen items. At the very top lay a small, leather-bound diary, its cover worn smooth with handling. Beside it, a child's drawing, rendered in the bright, unsteady crayon strokes of a very young hand, depicting a lopsided sun smiling over a stick figure family. Tucked beneath these was a single, dried flower, a rose, pressed flat, its color faded from what must have once been a vibrant red to a soft, dusky pink. And finally, at the very bottom, a small, intricately carved wooden bird, its wings outstretched as if in mid-flight. Each item felt precious, imbued with a quiet significance. This wasn't a collection of random keepsakes. It was a curated story, a life distilled into a few potent symbols. I reached for the diary first, my fingers tracing the soft, worn leather. There were no dates on the cover, no name. It felt intensely private, and a pang of hesitation struck me. Was it right for me to delve into this? Arthur had given me the box. Yes, but had he explicitly intended for me to read his innermost thoughts, if that's what this diary contained? But then I remembered the key, so cleverly hidden, the implication that he wanted it found, wanted the contents revealed. He hadn't just handed me a locked box, he provided the means to open it, a silent invitation. His words, "I thought you might appreciate it," took on a new meaning. Perhaps appreciation, in this case, meant understanding. With a sense of both trepidation and profound curiosity, I gently opened the diary. The first page was blank, save for a small, elegant inscription in faded ink in the top right corner, for Alara. The handwriting was flowing, almost calligraphic, and unmistakably Arthur's, though perhaps a younger, steadier version of his hand. Alara. The name was beautiful, unfamiliar. It certainly wasn't his late wife's name. I knew from neighborhood chatter that her name had been Margaret. I turned the page. The entries were not dated in the conventional way, but rather headed with seasons or significant events, like the spring of whispering willows, or after the harvest moon. The ink was faded, the paper brittle at the edges, but the writing was clear, filled with observations of nature, poetic musings, and, woven throughout, references to this mysterious Alara. Alara saw a kingfisher today by the old mill stream. One entry read. She said its colors were stolen from a summer sky and a forgotten sunset. How she sees the world, this child of mine, is a constant wonder. Child of mine? My breath caught in my throat. Arthur had a child? No one in the neighborhood had ever spoken of him having children. He was always just Mr. Abernathy, the quiet widower. I read on, piecing together a story fragment by fragment. Alara was his daughter. The diary was filled with his love for her, his observations of her growing up, her imaginative thoughts, her laughter. He wrote of her fascination with birds, her kindness to animals, her adventurous spirit. The pages painted a vivid picture of a cherished childhood, seen through the adoring eyes of a father. The child's drawing in the box suddenly made so much more sense. The stick figures must have been Arthur, his wife Margaret, and little Alara. Alara saw a kingfisher today by the old mill stream. One entry read. She said its colors were stolen from a summer sky and a forgotten sunset. How she sees the world, this child of mine, is a constant wonder. Child of mine? My breath caught in my throat. Arthur had a child? No one in the neighborhood had ever spoken of him having children. He was always just Mr. Abernathy, the quiet widower. I read on, piecing together a story fragment by fragment. Alara was his daughter. The diary was filled with his love for her, his observations of her growing up, her imaginative thoughts, her laughter. He wrote of her fascination with birds, her kindness to animals, her adventurous spirit. The pages painted a vivid picture of a cherished childhood, seen through the adoring eyes of a father. The child's drawing in the box suddenly made so much more sense. The stick figures must have been Arthur, his wife Margaret, and little Alara, but as I read further, the tone began to shift. Subtle hints of worry crept in. Alara's cough lingers. One entry noted. Margaret fusses, and I try to reassure her, but a small shadow touches my heart. The entries became shorter, more sporadic. The descriptions of playful days were interspersed with notes about doctors and remedies. The joy that had illuminated the earlier pages began to dim, replaced by a quiet, aching anxiety. I felt a growing sense of unease, a knot tightening in my chest. I knew, with a dreadful certainty that often accompanies stories of the past, that this was not heading towards a happy resolution. The dried rose, the little wooden bird, they suddenly felt less like charming mementos and more like relics of a love tinged with sorrow. The last few entries were almost unbearable to read. They were brief, stark, written in a hand that shook with emotion. The autumn leaves fall, and so does my spirit. She is so frail, my little bird, my Alara. And then, the final entry, just a few words, scrawled and blurred as if by tears. The silence is too loud. The nest is empty. I closed the diary, my own eyes wet. Alara, his daughter, lost. The weight of his quiet, lifelong grief settled upon me. For all these years, Arthur had lived next door, tending his roses, offering polite greetings, carrying this immense, unspoken sorrow within him. The box wasn't just a collection of items, it was a shrine, a father's tender memorial to a lost child. And he had given it to me. Why? The question throbbed in my mind. Why share this profound, private pain with me, a relative stranger? I looked at the other items. The drawing, so full of innocent joy. The rose, a symbol of love and beauty, now faded and fragile. The little wooden bird, its wings spread, perhaps symbolizing Alara's spirit or her love for them. Now free, I sat there for a long time, the open box on my lap, the diary clutched in my hand. The ordinary quiet of my living room felt different now, charged with the echoes of Arthur's past, with the love and loss he had held so close for so many decades. The strange gift had indeed uncovered a secret, a deeply human one, a story of a father's enduring love. And the realization of what he had shared and the trust he had placed in me by doing so was overwhelming. I knew I couldn't just close the box and put it away. This wasn't just Arthur's story anymore. In some small way, by sharing it, he had made it mine too. I felt a profound need to talk to him, to acknowledge what I had found. But how? How do you approach someone who has just handed you the fragile pieces of their broken heart? The next morning, I woke with a sense of heaviness, the story of Alara and Arthur's quiet grief replaying in my mind. The sun was shining, birds were chirping. The world outside was carrying on with its usual cheerfulness, oblivious to the profound emotions that had been unlocked in my little house. I looked at the wooden box, now sitting on my mantelpiece. It felt less like a mystery and more like a sacred object. I knew I had to speak with Arthur. Ignoring the depth of what he'd shared felt wrong, dismissive. But what could I possibly say? Thank you for the box. I now know about the tragic loss of your daughter. It sounded so blunt, so inadequate. I spent the morning rehearsing conversations in my head, none of them feeling right. Around mid-morning, I saw him in his garden again, a familiar sight, yet he looked different to me now. I saw not just the elderly neighbor, but a father who had loved deeply and lost terribly. His movements, as he snipped away at his rose bushes, seemed more deliberate, perhaps even a little more fragile than I'd previously perceived. Taking a deep breath, I walked out onto my porch. "Arthur?" I called gently. He straightened up slowly, turning to look at me. His eyes, those kind, crinkled eyes, held their usual mild expression. There was no outward sign of the momentous thing he had done the day before. "Good morning, Carol," he said, his voice calm.
I,
"I opened the box, Arthur," I said, my voice softer than I intended. He nodded, a slow, deliberate movement. He didn't seem surprised. He simply waited. It's very beautiful," I continued, fumbling for words. "The things inside." Alara's things, his gaze didn't waver, but I saw a flicker of something deep within his eyes, a sorrow acknowledged, perhaps, but also something else. Acceptance. "She was a special girl," he said quietly, his voice steady, but imbued with a gentle melancholy. "Loved her birds, she did. And flowers." He gestured with his secateur towards a particularly vibrant yellow rose. "That one there, Golden Celebration, that was her mother's favorite. Alara always said it looked like sunshine trapped in a flower." I felt a lump form in my throat. He was making it easy for me, opening the door to a conversation he must have known was coming. "The diary," I said, it's a beautiful tribute to her. You loved her very much. A father's love for his child is a powerful thing, Carol," he said, looking down at the rose bush. "It doesn't fade, not even when they fly off before you're ready." He paused, then looked back at me. "Margaret, my wife, she found it hard to speak of Alara after she was gone. The pain was too raw for her, I think. So I wrote. It was my way of keeping her close, of remembering the light she brought into our lives." "Why me, Arthur?" I finally asked the question that had been burning in my mind. "Why give it to me?" He was silent for a moment, considering. "I'm an old man, Carol. My time for tending memories is drawing to a close. Those things, they're precious, but they need to be with someone who understands. Someone who sees beyond the surface." He looked at me pointedly. "I've seen you. You're a quiet observer, like me. You appreciate stories." I didn't want her memory, her little light, to just be packed away in an attic when I'm gone. Or worse, discarded by people who wouldn't understand. His words touched me deeply. He saw me, not just as the neighbor who brought in his bins, but as someone capable of understanding the sanctity of his memories. "I don't have any family left to pass these things to," he continued, his voice softening. "And I thought, well, I hoped you might find some value in an old man's recollections. A reminder, perhaps, that even in the quietest lives, there are great loves and great sorrows." "I do, Arthur," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I value it more than I can say. It's an honor." A gentle smile touched his lips, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. Then that's all I could ask for. Knowing her memory is in good hands, it brings a certain peace. He then looked towards my porch. "The key, you found it then? Clever little hiding spot, wasn't it?" Took Alara's mother a week to find it the first time I showed her the box, many, many years ago. Alara found it in a day, of course. Sharp as a tack, that one. A shared, gentle laugh passed between us, a laugh that acknowledged the past and the present. The tension I had felt about this conversation dissolved, replaced by a profound sense of connection. It wasn't just a secret anymore. It was a story shared, a bond formed over the memory of a little girl who loved birds and sunshine. "She sounds like she was wonderful," I said. "She was," he affirmed, a nostalgic warmth in his tone. "Full of mischief and wonder." Thank you, Carol, for understanding. We stood there for a few more moments, a comfortable silence settling between us, the kind that exists when words are no longer necessary. The gift was no longer strange, it was a bridge. A bridge between his past and my present, between his grief and my empathy. He had given me more than just a box of mementos. He had given me a glimpse into the depths of a human heart, and, in doing so, had enriched my own. I knew our neighborly chats over the fence would never be quite the same. They would be layered with a new understanding, a shared knowledge of a life lived, loved, and tenderly remembered. My quiet cul-de-sac and the quiet man who lived next door suddenly felt a whole lot less ordinary. And I realized that personal discovery often comes in the most unexpected of packages, sometimes even in a simple wooden box from a neighbor. The world felt a little wider, a little more poignant, and my own life, in its quiet way, felt a little more connected to the vast, intricate tapestry of human experience.